Hey, and welcome back to my channel. This week I thought we would do a tutorial, which we haven't done in a couple of weeks, and I wanted to do a more in-depth one, so it's gonna be a two-parter. We're gonna be making white lilies. This is a great flower if you wanna practice wiring your petals and also taping together petals at the end. I think this one's going to be a really good challenge. But before we do that, don't forget to grab the ingredient and tool list that you're gonna need to make this in the description box below. Subscribe to my channel while you are down there, and let's make some lilies. I made a simple paper template for you guys to print out. I'm going to link that in the description box below. So it'll just be a PDF printout, and then you're able to cut it out and follow along. So I just drew this out, and now I'm going to cut it out with an X-Acto. And I also put the pistil and the stamens here, so you'll just need one pistil per flower, and then you're gonna need 6 stamens per flower and 6 petals per flower. So as soon as you've got your template cut out, we can begin making our petals. You're also gonna need something to form your petals on. I'm just gonna use a piece of aluminum foil and fold it over so it's doubled. Then I want the petals to be curved kind of like this, or maybe like my larger rolling pin. So I'm just gonna take this large rolling pin, I'll form the aluminum foil over that. Then I want my petals to just have kind of a gentle slope downwards. So just test that out. I think that's pretty good. I'm just gonna put one more piece of crinkled up aluminum foil inside so that it's not gonna collapse. I think this looks great. We just need a part for the tip of the petal to fold over, and then enough of a base so that your wire has a little bit of space here. So this should work great, and make a few of these. If you're making a bunch of petals, it'll make it a lot easier for you. Next, I will roll out the gum paste, and we will cut these out by hand. I've got some plain white gum paste here. Just gonna form that, and we're gonna roll it out just to a number 1 on the pasta machine so that we can also roll it on the groove board and get some nice deep grooves in order to thread our wires through. And I actually decided to try adding a little bit of Nicholas Lodge's gum paste because I had a bunch made from my previous video. So I needed a tiny bit of that into my regular gum paste to see if I could strengthen my normal gum paste just a little bit, and maybe that will help with inserting wires and it not being quite so fragile. So let me run this through the pasta machine to a number 1. We are all done. Just gonna grab my groove board and let's roll this gum paste out first on a diagonal just to really press those grooves in, and then up and down, thinning out the gum paste and pressing them in further. So lily petals aren't especially thin, so it's okay if your petals aren't super paper thin for this. And if you are using a new groove board or you haven't used it in a while, make sure to put a little bit of shortening on there so it doesn't stick. Okay, so next I will grab my cutting mat so that I'm not cutting into my nice silicone mat here, which is mostly just for rolling, and I can do some texturing on there too, but it will cut if I put an X-Acto blade to it. I'm just gonna smooth out this little bump so that I can cut out a petal right here. Just aligning the base of that petal right to the bottom, grabbing your X-Acto blade, switch your blade if it's not sharp, and just cutting around. Very easy shape, just 2 lines. And then I'll see if I can cut next to it. Yep, I think it'll fit. And just cut out the remaining petals that you can fit on your little piece of gum paste here. And make sure to cover up your gum paste petals in a double piece of plastic wrap with a damp towel over top. We're beginning with some 24 gauge wires, and as I mentioned, you're gonna need 6 petals per flower. So I'm going to cut these into thirds and just make sure that I have enough in order to make a few flowers. You're also going to need 26 or 28 gauge wires in order to make your stamens and your pistil as well. Grab one of your petals. You're going to dip the end of your wire in gum glue and wipe off the excess on the back of your hand. Then get the thickest part where we rolled it out. I probably could have added more pressure. I just wasn't used to this consistency of gum paste because I needed in that bit of Nicholas Lodge's gum paste. So I could have definitely used more pressure to thin out these petals, but this will do fine. And it's probably easier if you ever struggle with wiring your petals. So I'm just gonna insert that with one finger on either side, feeling as I go down to make sure that it's not popping through one way or another. And I'm gonna go maybe a quarter of the way to a third of the way. We don't wanna go too far because we want to be able to still shape this. And it's tricky when there's a wire, it's gonna start poking out and giving you all sorts of problems. Grab your large ball tool and thin out your edges, just like we would do for any other flower. So I'm thinning out the edge as best I can, and then if I can see a line from the ball tool, I just go over that gently with the ball tool to smooth it out, since we're not going to be using a veiner on this one. So that is nice and thinned out on those edges, but still nice and thick in the center. Flip your petal over. We're doing a technique very similar to the daffodil video. If you haven't watched that, go ahead and watch that. It's a great practice for making extra textures on your petals without a veiner. I'm going to use the fat end of this Dresden tool, and I'm gonna make 2 lines just on the outside of the center line, adding quite a bit of pressure because we want to be able to see it on the other side of the petal. More pressure on the top and then a little bit less as I go down. Now I'm also going to do 2 lines on the edges, so just go right along both of those edges. Flip your petal over, grab the fat end of a pointier Dresden tool. This one's my Teco one, and then this one is my PME one. And this one is just a little bit pointier. So I'm gonna go straight down the center line now with the pointier one, all the way to the bottom. So now we've got some nice textures here. If you found that you've lost any of the textures on the other side, just go back and do it again. So I want to see these 2 lines just a little bit more. So I'm just adding a little more pressure. That looks great. I'm just gonna shape it now. So I'm folding it along that center line and just allowing this to kind of take its own shape, look very fluid and organic. And then at the base, I want this bottom bit to kind of come to a point like this. So I'm gonna let it dry like this so that the petal is shaped a little bit kind of taller here with that fold, and then it opens up as we go down. So I'm grabbing my foil here, and I've already made 1 petal. Now you just have to place this on, giving it the movement that you want. So I'm just allowing it to kind of fall into place. And if you want it to go further down than it's able to because of the wire, just bend your wire a little bit so you can have a little bit more of a curve there. And then just double check that this is pinched at the base so that it's closed here and then opens up at the end. And I think this is good to go. I'm gonna make a bunch more petals, and then I'll see you back here to make the pistils and the stamens. So I've got some white gum paste here, and I'm gonna color it very, very light green for the pistil. So I have gum paste that's green already, and this is gooseberry mixed with a touch of spruce green, just a very, very tiny bit of spruce. And I think that's gonna be enough. We just want this to be nice and subtle, just so we don't have to dust so much. All right, that looks good. Let's begin making the pistil. So I've got a small piece of gum paste, maybe a pea-sized amount, and I'm going to just roll that into a bit of a log, Then I'm gonna thread that onto my wire, my 26 gauge wire, keeping it as centered as possible. And then I'm going to thin it out. I've seen lots of people do this with fondant rollers, so you can just go back and forth, but I'm just gonna use my hand right now just to roll it back and forth until it's been thinned out onto the entire wire. So I'm just kind of adding some pressure going up the wire, kind of in this direction, and then if I want to stretch it down, I just go in that direction. And I want to leave just a tiny bit of room at the top in order to add on the top of the pistil. So I'm trying to get this quite thin. You could use a 28 gauge wire for this as well. I just didn't have any. Okay, so we've got this nice and thinned out all over our wire. And I'm just gonna make sure that that is nice and secure. So I'm just giving it an extra pinch at the base. I'm also gonna measure it against the little template I made. So I think I want it to be slightly shorter. I'm just going to like make a little mark here and then use my scissors, just cut off the excess so it doesn't get too long, and just smooth that out. And last thing I want to do is just give it a little bit of shape because these are never really sticking straight up. They usually have a bit of a curve to them. So I will just curve it, keep it straight at the base, and then just allow it to have a small curve at the top. And we have that tiny piece of wire poking out so that we can still add the top to this. So now grab a very tiny piece of that green gum paste again. I'm gonna make it into kind of like a ball, and then I'll squish that down into a disc shape. And then grab your tweezers and you want to pinch that so we have like a 3-part pistil. Very tiny work here, so just take your time. Just like that. Then we can just add a tiny bit of glue on here onto the gum paste so that it adheres well. Pick up our tiny topper for this. So I just gave that a good press. And then I can reshape this as I need to. And give it one more press down to make sure that it's not going anywhere. Perfect. So there is our pistil finished. Let's make some stamens. I really like the stamens on these lilies that are kind of a brown color. I think they are a really beautiful contrast to the white petals. So let's make a quick brown color using Color Theory, our complementary colors. If you haven't watched that video yet, go watch that. I'm gonna link it in the description box below and somewhere in this video as well. So I'm just gonna need some red and some green, which is the complementary color, and that should give us brown. So I'm gonna start with a little bit more red than green because they are definitely a little bit on the red side, but the green should help mute it down into a more brown hue as opposed to like a bright burgundy red. Getting there. I think I just want a little bit of yellow because it's turning almost like a purple hue. So we're gonna use the complementary color of purple, which is yellow. I had just a little bit of yellow gum paste, so I'll just knead that through. I'm gonna start with a small amount first. I think what we're missing here is a bit of orange, so I'm going to go grab that. So I just have some orange gel paste and just put a little bit on there. It's so dark, I'm not worried about adding too much. And a touch of shortening on my fingers, just to make sure it doesn't dye my hands. And knead that through. I think this looks perfect now. We've got a nice balance of that brownishness and then also a bit of that orange. Now we can make our stamens. This is another really delicate thing we're making since it's so tiny. I'm grabbing my kind of dull knife blade from my Ateco set. I am grabbing some of those 26 gauge wires. And I'm not going to do the gum paste on the stem. I'm just gonna tape these because it's just too much to do them all right now. I'm just going to bend these wires at a 90-degree angle, just like that. So I am able to insert my tiny stamen on top of there. So it's maybe 2 millimeters, a 1/4 inch or so. Taking a small amount of that gum paste. So I'm gonna roll that into a nice smooth ball, then thin it out, rolling it back and forth into a log until it's about this big, about double the width of our little bent over part. Grab your dull knife tool and hold up your little stamen and give it a mark right down the middle, just like that. Take your wire, just the smallest amount of glue on the end of that wire, and then we can insert this. So I like to just go from the center and kind of insert it as best I can, and then we can reshape. So I inserted that. I'm just gonna pinch it a little bit around the wire to make sure that it's not going anywhere. Then I'm gonna hold that and just reshape, give it that line one more time to make sure that it is nice and even looking. And once it feels sturdy, we're just gonna allow that to dry. Let's not fuss with it too much. Otherwise, you're gonna start messing it up. You can give it a little bit of a taper at the ends if you want. But that is 1 stamen done. You need 6 per flower. Thank you so much for watching part 1. Part 2 is going to be out next week, so stay tuned for that. Make sure to download the template for this tutorial in the description box below. Subscribe to my channel while you're there, like this video, and I'm going to see you next week.